prophesy again.
And now, the Trumpet Daily with Stephen Flurry.
Well, hello everyone. That's a little bit of Frank Sinatra leading into this fine Monday morning. We're broadcasting to you live from New York, where we had a PAC event last night, 210 people in attendance. Of that figure, 150 or so were non-members, and we had 34 people sign up for the follow-up Bible study. Lots of history in this city. With respect to the Worldwide Church of God, going way back, and really it was even surprising to me how many people, you come into New York and you don't know quite what to expect, but quite a few of the people that I talked with last night had some history with the WCG, some history with some of the Laodicean branches that formed after Herbert Armstrong's death, but certainly a good, an impressive figure. 34 people who want to come for the follow-up study. It was just an exciting night all the way around. I think there might have even been a few people that refrained from coming into the city. They had a huge gay pride parade. I guess June is the gay pride month, and so they finished up the month here in New York. It was the 50th anniversary of, I think it's the Stonewall uprising from 1969, so that was all over the news. They had live coverage of this event. I think hundreds of thousands of people involved, and I talked a fair bit about this in the lecture presentation last night, and so we'll come to that a little bit later on in the program as I give you a little bit of a summary of what I talked about last night. Of course, we have another lecture this evening, and I urged people to come out for the second night in the hope that they would take inspiration from a stir to action type message to do something with this truth that they've been exposed to. So we're here in the hotel room. It's a little bit easier to get off and running today with compared to last week. I think it was a 6 a.m. start for us in Red Deer, Alberta. But here on the East Coast, it's 8 o'clock, so we were able to get a little bit more rest, and everything's set up here in the hotel. And I forget what street we're on. We're, I think, maybe 79th or 78th Street in Upper Manhattan. Today we're going to be visiting the Churchill bookstore. It's called Chartwell, not that far from Rockefeller Plaza. And then, of course, this afternoon we'll be getting ready for the event. So lots to get into on today's program. I guess one last thing that I could bring out is just speaking of the history of God's work in this city. The last PAC event that we had was in 2006, and we actually had some people there last night who attended that PAC. That was headed up by my father 13 years ago, I guess it would be, and according to Cal Culpepper, our regional director for the Northeast, he said we might have had close to 1,000 people, certainly several hundred people that turned out for that event, and they had so many follow-up Bible studies, I think 7 or 8 follow-up Bible studies. We didn't have a huge number of people that actually became members following that personal appearance campaign, but it was very, very well received, and certainly we hope that with the 34 that have signed up for the follow-up Bible study, that we'll get some really amazing and wonderful and abundant fruit to come from this PAC event. As I think many of you know, we're going from here to Memphis tomorrow for a one-night-only event down in Memphis before we make our way back to Edmond late Tuesday night. So tomorrow, Richard Palmer is going to be subbing in from Edstone. But today, as I say, we're coming to you live from New York. There's always a certain amount of excitement, I suppose, when you look at the glitz and the glamour of the big city. But then you walk through some of these streets and you smell the not so, well, there's all kinds of things that aren't the greatest in the big city. And as you walk through, you think, wow, it's nice to be here for a day or two, but it certainly makes you appreciate places like Edstone and, of course, our headquarters campus in Edmond, Oklahoma. This piece here I thought was interesting, given the big city life. It says here, children raised in rural areas have better motor skills than urban children, study finds. And the article says many studies point to the mental health benefits of living in greener areas outside cities. But could living in the countryside also be better for us physically? A study out of Finland shows that young children living in rural areas have better motor skills than those living in urban areas. The cause of this appeared to be that rural children spend more time outdoors and are thus more adapted to the demands of playing outside, according to researchers at the University of, this school in Finland that I can't pronounce. In any event, it's pointing out what really is an obvious point, that spending more time outside, spending more time in God's creation is good for us. Now, that said, I think at the same time, there are a lot of people in this city who do walk a lot, and so you don't see as many obese people as maybe you would see in, for instance, the South. And I think I've been impressed, too, just in the drive to this hotel last night or yesterday afternoon. You just see a lot of people down by the Hudson River running on the waterfront and even running through some of the busy and congested streets. So there's quite a few New Yorkers that do spend a lot of time moving, which is something that we've stressed quite a lot on this program. So that's a positive, but at the same time, moving out and about in this concrete jungle, you really are cut off in so many ways from God's creation. Following up on a point we made last week regarding the Democratic debates, I also touched on this last night at the campaign. But this is an interesting story here from the Associated Press about keeping everything within 60 seconds. It's talking about the soundbite that all of these politicians are quite good at. Just the short little snippet that's what they're aiming for, something that will gain traction and hopefully go viral. But the AP says here, each man shall make, this is going back to 1960, each man shall make an opening statement of approximately 8 minutes duration. That's what the CBS moderator back in 1960 said before the debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. This is, I think that was the first debate, the first presidential debate that was actually broadcast live on television. And so here they had, imagine in any of these debates today, the opening statement going on for 8 minutes. You can't imagine that ever happening in a debate today. It says here at the AP, on the Thursday evening or last week, 59 years later, NBC moderator Chuck Todd had this to say to Democratic presidential hopefuls in the closing moments of a 10-candidate rhetorical scrum. Please, for 1 or 2 words only, please, 1 or 2 words only. That was toward the end of the debate last week. It says here, for this particular event, the maximum time allotted for any sort of thoughtful expression was a nice round minute. That's all that they had, about 60 seconds. You got to keep it within 60 seconds. And then it just rattles off some of the quotes that from last week that are quite humorous. So climate change, the economy, taxes, racism, healthcare, how you'd stand up to China, why you're concerned about socialism. Go, you've got 60 seconds. If I could just finish, said Michael Bennett of Colorado. If I may say, said U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. Your time has expired, said moderator Lester Holt. Vice President Biden, 30 seconds, said moderator Rachel Maddow. A real 30 seconds, Joe Biden shot back. This is the back and forth from last week. The AP says, if this week's twin and twittery debates demonstrated one thing about America, it was this: the ever-increasing pace of society and the fragmentation of its methods of communication have sent electoral politics drifting into the choppy waters of utter absurdity. Lost in the mayhem was this: America as a society is actually asking the people who would lead it to compress some of history's most complex and persnickety problems into not even sound bites, but sound nibbles. That's what the politicians aim for, and this is what the consumer of news today expects. Something that happens within just a few seconds, just a few nibbles. You can see why so many Americans are totally uninformed when it comes to politics, when it comes to news, when it comes to world events, because all that they're typically viewing is what they see on social media, maybe a picture, again, maybe a few seconds of commentary or a soundbite. What's produced this state of affairs? That's what the AP asks. It says this was but the latest iteration of political rhetoric as interstate highway billboard. Make sure all the letters and images are big enough, bold enough, colorful enough. Make an impression for those driving by at 70 miles per hour while checking their texts and reaching for their Starbucks. See, everybody's so easily distracted. There's so much information. There's so many distractions. It says today, so much of the American media diet is delivered live and consumed in slivers of immediacy rather than larger assembled narratives. Things arrive in a million little pieces, so each of those pieces must have a chance at being noticed, at being remembered. And then it says here, finally, brevity might be the soul of wit, not to mention ratings, but pinning the future of history's most complex most complex republic on ideas expressed in bursts of seconds and minutes is a practice that is, well, eminently debatable. That's from the Associated Press, the 60-second soundbite. Well, there's a story here, too. Richard forwarded quite a few news items. This one here on the deal between the EU and MERCOSUR. They finally signed this trade deal on Friday. And Richard, I'm only going to cover this briefly. Richard will be subbing in tomorrow, and I would imagine he'll go into this in a fair bit of depth. But because it's something that my father has talked about quite a lot over the years, it's worth hitting here briefly before Richard gets into it tomorrow. This is something they've tried to get done, the EU and these South American nations. They've tried to get this done for 20 years now. The MERCOSUR nations, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, they signed this draft agreement on Friday with the EU nations, and this is something that my father has, again, been drawing attention to for years. I'll take you back to this clip from earlier this year. This is January the 18th, 2019, in my father's program, America is Being Besieged Economically. Clip 1.
Greetings, everyone. The European Union is about to make its largest trade deal ever, and it's probably going to be made in 2019, and that certainly is the forecast. That trade is going to be made with the MERCOSUR trade bloc, which includes Brazil and Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. And we have been prophesying for over 60 years that this is going to happen. And what it all means, it's going to mean some very dark days for America if we don't heed Bible prophecy and realize what God has to say about it. Latin America has helping to create the Holy Roman Empire. And they have a lot of rich resources that the European Union or the Holy Roman Empire needs. And of course, they're providing some great needs that the Latin American people also have. Brazil has a new president, and he's helping to push this deal through.
That's my father from January of this year, how Latin America is helping to create the Holy Roman Empire. We've talked so much about the coming trade war. Really, we're already in the midst of it. I know President Trump is on his trip through Southeast Asia, trying to solidify a trade deal with China. But here, this is a story that's not getting much coverage in the U.S. or in the U.K., and it's something that we've been, as he said there, we've been prophesying for 60 years. 60 years. What does this mean when you have Latin America coming together with the European Union? Well, make sure you tune in to tomorrow's program. Richard Palmer coming to you live from Edstone as he'll dig into this story, this significant story that really gets very little coverage. And particularly following the previous story that I just went through, the 60-second soundbite. How much time would people, how much attention would people give to a story like this? The EU and MERCOSUR, the MERCOSUR nations, what is that? Why should I worry about that? Why should I be concerned about that? Well, it is significant. It is a big story. It should be getting more coverage than what it's been giving. I mentioned President Trump's trip through Southeast Asia. Of course, yesterday, all the big news coming from that is or was with respect to his meeting with the chairman of North Korea, the dictator, Chairman Kim, the president, and what a sign of the times as well. The president sending out a tweet basically to make this to offer to meet with the North Korean dictator, and they met at the DMZ, and then President Trump took a few steps into North Korea, becoming the first president to do that. And there's not a lot of commentary really that we can give on this particular meeting, other than to say that had Barack Obama done this, he'd have the Nobel Peace Prize by now. The media, though, they're not going to give President Trump any credit for reaching out to this dictator and trying to restart the denuclearization talks. This was the president yesterday talking about Barack Obama and how much he wanted to meet with Chairman Kim. Clip 2.
President Obama wanted to meet, and Chairman Kim would not meet him. The Obama administration was begging for a meeting. They were begging for meetings constantly, and Chairman Kim would not meet with him. And for some reason, we have a certain chemistry or whatever.
And, of course, all the Obama people rushed to Barack Obama's defense, saying there's no truth to that at all. The media, of course, defending Barack Obama. But that's President Trump saying, hey, Barack Obama wanted to meet with him. And again, how would the media have treated that sort of a meeting? Well, they're all over the place, all over the map with respect to President Trump's meeting, and we'll see what comes from that. Of course, we know ultimately that China is the power behind North Korea, and maybe as part of the trade deal, if there is one with China, maybe North Korea, maybe China will pull back North Korea to some extent. We'll see, but we know that in the long term, China's working to unite all of those Asian nations together with Russia and China in prophecy. Of course, we have lots of literature, a booklet on that very subject. Brent Noctegal, our Jerusalem correspondent, he sent us some information on this ceremony that was taking place in Jerusalem yesterday, the Pilgrim Road at the city of David. Big ceremony there, just spotlighting some of the history of the Jewish people in the Israelites in the ancient city of David. And at this ceremony, they had our U.S. Ambassador David Friedman. He was there giving some powerful commentary on Israel's history in the region and how it relates to the United States and the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Declaration of Independence. Of course, we're coming up to America's birthday this week on Thursday. Here we are at July 1st already, but we're coming up to the July 4th holiday in just a few days. And here's what Ambassador Friedman had to say at this ceremony at the city of David just yesterday. Clip 3.
As we were about to celebrate the 243rd anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, what was so special about the Declaration of Independence of the United States? What the Declaration of Independence did for the first time, it was to change the way we all think about the relationship between a government and its citizens. As you all know, the Declaration of Independence recognized that each and every human being has unalienable rights endowed by our Creator. These aren't rights granted by Republicans, they're not granted by Democrats, they're not granted by governments. These are inalienable rights that belong to every human being, and they are gifts and entitlements given to us by God. Now, how did our founding fathers know what those rights were? How would our founding fathers know what particular rights were so important that they would be endowed to us by our Creator? Well, the answer is, among other things, they read the Bible. All you need to do is look at the book of Isaiah. Isaiah, who lived in the same period as King Hezekiah, who built that pool, who built that Brechat HaShiloach. So what did Isaiah say? He said, I'll say it first in Hebrew, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah u'devar Hashem miYerushalayim. Out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. So we think as Americans, American heritage. This place is as much a heritage of the United States as it is a heritage of Israel, and it illustrates better than anything I could ever say just why the bond between the United States and the state of Israel is so broad, so deep, and so unbreakable.
As he was pointing out in his speech, I think it was about a 10-minute speech, they got some flack, those that put together this ceremony, for bringing in Mr. Friedman, who's an American. But as he said, and so he's excited to be speaking on the Trumpet Daily radio show on the American nation's birthday, 243 years, the 243rd anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Some powerful words there from Ambassador Friedman. A stamp of affirmation on the contents of the United States and Britain in prophecy. When we come back, we'll summarize some of the content from last night's personal appearance campaign in New York City. And also, we have some clips later on in the show. We'll finish today's show with some feedback from some of the people that attended the PAC event. And we also have a short clip from the personal appearance campaign last night as well, from my address last night. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily radio show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We'll be right back.
This is KPCG-FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Freedom is one of the most sought-after ideals in human history. Man's search for freedom has taken him into the fiercest of protests, struggles, revolutions, civil wars, and even world wars. Today, in the midst of free societies, many continue to fight for what they perceive as ever greater freedoms. And yet, many of these same people are actively fighting against law. Few people understand that this war against law actually undermines true freedom. To learn more, request Gerald Flurry's booklet, No Freedom Without Law. In this free booklet, you will see what the Bible says about the latter-day spirit of rebellion and lawlessness that is now so common in our nations today. Also request America Under Attack. In this booklet, you will learn more about the spirit behind this attack on law. You'll see where this is leading. Both booklets are offered freely at no cost or obligation to you. Request No Freedom Without Law and America Under Attack. Email your request to td@kpcg.fm or visit thetrumpet.com. The Trumpet Daily.
It was funny going down to the lobby of the hotel this morning to get a little coffee and get the local paper, which was down there, a complimentary copy of the New York Times. Here's the New York Times, which is, of course, an international paper in every respect, and something that all of the media outlets, the news media, the TV programs, the cable news shows, they basically, at least the left-wing ones, they work from the New York Times as far as content goes. But it was just funny to me that being that we're in New York, this is the local paper here. This is the New York newspaper, and there's a fair bit there on the front page about the president's meeting with Chairman Kim. There's a featured story on the gay pride event that took place yesterday afternoon. And we actually had a few people that called us, our watch line, yesterday morning to say that they wouldn't be able to make it to the PAC event because of all of the congestion. And I know for us, when we landed in New Jersey, we had to then drive across the George Washington Bridge, which charges $15, by the way, $15 to drive into New York City. It's free to get out of the city, so surprising to me that there's not more people taking advantage of that. In any event, getting in, it was quite congested, and the people that called into the watch line yesterday, a few of them anyway, said that they were not going to be able to attend the PAC last night because of all of the congestion, all of the craziness going on with respect to that parade. So hopefully we'll have some strong numbers tonight. As I mentioned at the start of the show, we had 210 people there in attendance, 150 or so that came from outside the church. 34, not the greatest follow-through rate, but a really strong showing as far as the follow-up Bible study, 34 people. And then, as I said before the break, we have some clips that we've lined up from last night's event as well. So make sure that you stay with us through to the end of the show so that you can hear what some of the New Yorkers had to say about this PAC event. Last night I went through some of the news that I've covered even recently here on the radio program about the Democrats' radical swing to the left. I talked about how that this state, New York, has just fully embraced abortion all the way up to the point of birth, even. I referred back to what happened earlier this year with the legislation that provides, basically the healthcare practitioner, as the legislation, that's the language it uses. If the healthcare official deems it necessary for the mother to have an abortion, she can have an abortion right up to the point of birth. The Daily Wire says, so long as a licensed practitioner acts in good faith, in quotes there, a baby can be murdered in the womb up to the birth in order to protect the patient's life or health. Notably, it says, the meaning of the word health is not defined within the legislation. So they keep it vague, they keep it broad, they keep it general. They excuse all of this with the extreme cases. But then, as we know from the practice of abortion itself, it becomes something that's very much mainstream. They use the exception to make the rule, and then the rule is used for anyone and everyone, just as a matter of convenience. For every 1,000 births here in the city of New York, there's 544 abortions. People at the campaign last night gasped when I mentioned that figure. Think of it. 1,000 live births each year, or for every 1,000, I should say. There's quite a lot more than just 1,000. But for every 1,000, there's 544 abortions. Last year in this city, or rather this is from 2015, the latest figures that we have. In New York City, in 2015, there were 63,000 abortions. This is just one city in the United States. And when they passed that legislation earlier this year to make it even easier to have abortions, even later in the pregnancy, when Governor Cuomo signed it into law, they cheered him in the state legislature. They cheered for this bill. They love it. They love these sorts of laws that make it easier to kill babies. It's astounding. It's sickening. That's in the great state of New York, many would say. And then, of course, you had all of the news yesterday with respect to this parade running just, I think, 10, 15 minutes from where we had the PAC event. Well, I also updated all of our trumpet readers on just some of the news with respect to the president's trip through Southeast Asia. Iran set to exceed its enriched uranium limit. And that's coming here in the very, very near future. We talked about Russia and Germany, this Nord Stream past the point of no return, as we wrote in our trumpet brief on Friday. We talked about Angela Merkel's health. She's had 2 episodes now, shaking uncontrollably. This poor woman, and of course her opponents in the political scene in Germany, they're hoping that this leads to her early resignation so that Germany can get a new leader. And of course, Britain's in the process of selecting a new leader as well. Lots of dramatic changes in the world today, in the world of geopolitics. Boris Johnson's about to come in. He's a friend of President Trump. He's campaigning on the promise to carry out Brexit. It looks like October 31st is the deadline. Finally, it's been 3 years. 3 years since Britain voted to leave. And for 3 years, the politicians leading Britain have been doing everything that they can to oppose the will of the people. It'll be interesting. I think Brad McDonald has written some on the Trumpet website over the last several days about these dramatic changes happening in Britain. and how that the UK is going to go along with the United States, as Hosea 5:11 brings out, following the commandment of Jeroboam, and maybe for a time having a temporary resurgence like the U.S. because of God's mercy, because of God's kindness and compassion, giving us one final opportunity, one short little age of prosperity before Assyrian conquest. Meanwhile, as I say, Germany's about to get a new leader. Germany's entering into pacts with Russia. The European Union is entering into this trade deal with the MERCOSUR nations. Where is this leading? My father wrote in an article a few years ago, he said the Second World War ended with the development and use of the nuclear bomb. A world war where many nations, some of which sponsor terrorism, start out with nuclear weapons is an unparalleled nightmare. We can't even imagine how bad it will be. The last World War, such a powerful point to make, the last World War ended with the use of a nuclear weapon. And of course, they were rushing to try to create, to design this weapon, this nuclear bomb, this atom bomb in 1945, so that they could end that nightmare. Well, now there's nuclear weapons all over the earth. Something like 10 nations that have nuclear weapons, 16,000 of them. Enough to wipe out mankind many times over. So you begin to get a sense of what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24, where he said, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." Look at our history. Look at the history from just 75 years ago or so. History is repeating itself. But the magnitude of destruction this next time around, as far as world war is concerned, it's going to be unlike anything this world has ever seen, just as Jesus promised, just as Jesus prophesied. And we're, of course, bringing it upon ourselves. And we can thank God that his intervention will cut it short and spare mankind from completely extinguishing itself. Except those days should be shortened. There should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. See, it's going to be so bad that God says mankind would cease to exist if not for God's intervention, if not for God cutting it short. For the elect's sake, as it says there, God has to intervene. Jesus Christ must return to this earth in order to stop the nightmare, in order to stop the madness. Well, there is hope in the end. I brought this out last night as well. There is hope. 1 Peter 4 and verse 1 talks about us being armed with the mind of Christ. We've talked in recent programs about the mind of our Creator, acquiring a mind like God's. We have to be armed with that mind. We have to put it on or let it in, as Philippians 2:5 says. Staying in 1 Peter 4, verse 7, it says, "But the end of all things is at hand. Be you therefore sober, and watch unto prayer." I quoted from the Living Hope booklet last night, where my father says regarding this verse, the fact that Christ's return is so near should change our behavior. The knowledge of Christ's imminent return should make us urgent spiritually. And so that's what I want to get into tonight, or at least some material that would help, as I told them last evening, that would help them become more urgent, that would help them change their behavior. We're facing terrifying times just ahead of us. God wants us to Well, he wants the reality of this coming crisis to motivate us to change our lives, to give everything that we can to this work, to give more to God's work, to be moved and motivated by these events that we're seeing, these world events. They do concern us. Matthew 24, that's where Jesus, of course, prophesied of great tribulation. He also said in this same passage, Matthew 24, verse 37, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." See, before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying. All of those activities are fine when done within the bounds of God's law. But the problem then, and it's the same today, is that they were living outside the bounds of God's law. And so God said to Noah, "You better build an ark because a flood is coming." And everyone except for Noah and his family, they were in the midst of a deep slumber, spiritually speaking. And we're seeing the same thing happen today. The same thing. I referred to this author, this former Worldwide Church of God member. She wrote a book, and evidently she's touring around now talking about just how much of a nightmare it was for her and her family growing up in the Worldwide Church of God. This is her memory. This is her history. There's lots of people that try to revise the history of the Worldwide Church of God. And that's not to say there weren't families that were dysfunctional or unhappy. But if that was the case, they can't blame that on Herbert Armstrong. They can't blame it on Mr. Armstrong's teachings, because Mr. Armstrong was out there promoting the truth of the Bible, promoting the Ten Commandments, talking about how God's law was holy and just and perfect. And then these critics come along years later and say, well, actually, it was horrible. And God's law is not holy and just and right and perfect. It's a horrible thing, they say. She said, or it says in the brochure advertising her event, I guess she had a lecture advertising her book just a few minutes from here, last Thursday, right here in New York City. But the brochure says only faith in Jesus, the Bible, significant tithing, and the church's leader could save them from the evils of American culture. So her recollection, her revisiting this history, she's saying that, well, everyone just looked to Herbert Armstrong. They worshiped a man, pretty much. And only he could rescue you or save you from the evils of American culture. And that's not what Herbert Armstrong taught at all. But what about the evils of American culture? What about what was on display just yesterday here in New York City? What did Herbert Armstrong have to say about that? What is God's truth? What does the Bible have to say? I just read it to you, Matthew 24, 37 to 39. As in the days of Noah. Well, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. And they didn't know until the flood came and took them all away. This is an article, everything you need to know about the New York City Pride March. The Pride March, this is the march yesterday. Hundreds of thousands of people in the march and watching the march. It says it's a time to celebrate queer identities, increase visibility of the community, and demand full and continued equality from LGBTQIA+ people. The acronym just gets longer and longer and longer as we embrace more and more deviant behaviors. And here they're seeking continued equality. And look at it. It got live coverage from the media and the hosts on TV yesterday afternoon when we switched it on, just raving about this movement. Total support from popular culture, from big business, from government, from Republicans, Democrats, from the media, newspapers, websites. As I said last night, what kind of support would they give to a parade for biblical morality? I'm pretty sure they wouldn't get much of a turnout. There'd probably be a lot of people turning out to denounce it, to shout it down. It says for the first time, World Pride has made its way to the U.S., New York City to be specific, and the timing is no coincidence. Talks about the 50-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And then later on it says, on the last Sunday in June, people from around the world will flood Manhattan to sing songs, wave flags, and shed light on the important issues facing the LGBTQIA+ community. However you identify, this historic celebration is one of 2019's can't-miss events. Can't miss this one. You can't miss this Pride March. And a lot of people took that admonition and followed through on their support for this Sodom and Gomorrah society, as in the days of Noah. This is something that we celebrate today. Biblical morality, we denounce that. God's authority, we reject that. But any deviant lifestyle or behavior, that we celebrate. We put on a parade. We show the whole world how we're excited about it. I went through Romans 1 last night. And Isaiah 3, which says we declare our sin. It's not just the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's that we declare it as well that God's so upset about. You have the Sodom and Gomorrah behavior, and then you have the media and popular culture and modern technology amplifying those sins or displaying those sins out for the whole world to see. And really, what it's showing, what it's putting on display, is the fact that the family, the traditional family, it's a total breakdown, total destruction of the traditional family. That's what this shows. That's what it proves. My father, I referred back to the July 2017 trumpet, the trumpet from a couple of years ago, where we talked about the moral decline, the family being under attack, and why it matters. Why moral decline matters. That was the feature from that Trumpet magazine. And then my father's personal on the evidence shows families under attack. He referred to Melanie Phillips' book, Guardian Angel, a powerful, powerful issue of the Trumpet 2 years ago, July 2017. Well, that's just a little sampling of some of the things that we talked about last night at the personal appearance campaign right here in New York City. And we're broadcasting to you live from our hotel setup here in New York City on this beautiful Monday morning. And when we come back, we'll conclude today's program with a short clip from my address last night, together with some feedback from those who attended the personal appearance campaign here in New York City. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send any and all comments to td@kpcg.fm. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. Herbert Armstrong often said it was more difficult to unlearn an erroneous supposed truth than it is to learn a new truth. Even after 58 years of faithfully serving God, he had not fully and clearly realized the significance of the fact revealed in Genesis 3:22-24 that, in fact, God had closed the Holy Spirit and eternal life to mankind in general until the removal of Satan at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Traditional Christian teaching has always assumed there is a contest between God and Satan, that God has been trying desperately to get the world saved. In other words, God had sent Jesus Christ at his first coming to try to win this ongoing war against Satan. Traditional Christianity has taught that whosoever will may come and be saved through Jesus. For many years, Mr. Armstrong partially realized the error of this assumption, but the full truth on this point did not come crystal clear to his mind until the last few years of his life. This truth, fully explained in Mystery of the Ages, is indeed mind-boggling. This book clears what has been fully clouded in mystery. It will open your eyes to the truth of these long-hidden mysteries. This enlightening volume thoroughly explains precisely what the Bible says about the 7 great mysteries of life. It is free upon request. For more, visit thetrumpet.com. This is KPCG FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily.
Don't be weighed down. And then he says in verse 36, watch you, therefore, and pray always. Similar to what Peter said, 1 Peter 4:7. Watch, pray always, that you might be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Now that's talking about standing before Christ at his return to this earth, the Mount of Olives, Jerusalem. Watch, pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape. Some wonderful admonitions there, some practical instruction, and we'll do our best tomorrow to make it even more practical. That's a short excerpt from my conclusion last night, urging the people attending the PAC event here in New York City to return for the second lecture. That'll be this evening at 7:30 p.m., and we'll have updates. Richard, as I said, will be filling in for me on tomorrow's program from Edstone, but we'll certainly update you on the facts and figures from day 2 in New York, as well as the one-day event in Memphis, Tennessee on Tuesday night. So with that, we'll now switch over to some of the feedback. This is 2 minutes or so of comments from people at last night's event.
It was a very good lecture. The last time I've been to one of the lectures, that was back in 2006 when his father gave it. And I'm surprised that you're here again, because it's been like a very long time, like 13 years, and I'm glad to have everybody back.
Something very much needed. Stephen Flurry was saying that you got to make that change, that step up.
I saw him on the World Tomorrow television program, slamming at the desk saying, open your Bibles, blow the dust off, read it. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then I started reading, and in 1985, I was baptized. So I'm very familiar and with the disaster that happened in the Worldwide Church of God, and how Stephen Flurry wrote Raising the Ruins, and Mr. Flurry had the courage out of all those ministers to step forward and tell the truth and to rebuild the restored truths.
I love hearing the Word of God and help us to remain focused on what we should be doing. And there is only one way, God's way.
It's always great. It's always great. I enjoy the program. It refreshes my brains. and remind me of my commitment towards the Lord. Since I was living in Trinidad, I've been following up with the program, and since I came here to live, I've been following up with the program. And there's nothing like it. It's God's true church.
It's a teaching that it blows, it expands your mind, It expands your mind to see a vision of the future and in a different way than what all the church is preaching.
There you have it. That's some feedback from our PAC event last night here in New York City. Tonight is day 2 of the 2-day campaign, so hopefully we'll have a good turnout. Like last evening, as I said, 210 people in attendance, 34 signing up for the follow-up Bible study. We had 7 people come down from Massachusetts, 1 from over in Pennsylvania, and 1 came from as far away as South Carolina. That was last night. Tonight, hopefully another big turnout and even more added to the 34 that we have signed up for the follow-up Bible study. So we will update you on all of this on Wednesday's program. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. Thanks for joining us today in New York City, and we'll see you next time.